what does it mean for a brand to take a risk these days? And what does it mean for something to be brand safe? Creators are stretching the rules and marketers have to adapt. And today, we've got insights from a Twink and a Redhead, perhaps one of the most risk-taking creator duos out there. And yet, they've got brand partners to spare. Welcome to Marketing Brew Weekly. I'm Jenny Wynn, reporter at Marketing Brew.
I'm Kelsey Sutton, editor.
And I'm Katie Hicks, senior reporter. Let's get into it. All right, so when we think of brand safety, we're thinking about brands not wanting to be associated with anything that's too political or sexual or has swear words, things like that. But I recently spoke with Grant and Ash, also known as a Twink and a Redhead, and we talked about how that might be exactly what some audiences actually want. So let's kind of first recap. So Grant and Ash are this creator duo. They make like parody songs about brands typically. Some of their songs are Panera, Barnes & Noble, Disney Adult, and BJ Maxx. So it's not the most safe for work content, but they get so much engagement. They have so many loyal followers, people who love these like parodies. They also do parody videos too, in addition to songs, and they're currently on tour right now. So
I also know them from, they star in InStyle's social series as well, right?
Yep, they were in The Intern.
Like, yes, yeah, and I feel like they have caught a lot of brands' attention to the point where they are now in this like editorial space, but it's still like very much in their style. So yeah, they are out there and they are bringing in the partners, but like you said, their stuff is not exactly what you would traditionally consider brand safe, which is very interesting.
No, and they have had brand partners like so many, including like Netflix, La Roche-Posay, Bravo, Bose, American Eagle, Aeropostale, Spotify. Like they've had a lot of brand partners, but they also are comfortable with alienating some. Grant has we have a clip of Grant kind of talking about that here.
We've made like satirical like brand deals that are completely fake. Like Disney will never work with us and we are fine with that, whatever, but they're so fun to poke fun at because they are so like rigid and clean and like whatever. And so we've made like fake brand deals acting like we went on a brand trip to Pandora and Ashley's mouth is stained blue.
So I think this is so funny because I wonder for brands who see this content, they're like, okay, Grant and Ash, they have a ton of followers on TikTok and on Instagram. People are going to see them on tour. And also, if they're making a parody video of your brand, they're gonna do it whether or not you're involved. So I feel like at the bare minimum, it's like, well, if we're partnering with them, at least we know what's coming.
Yeah, that's so true.
If literally nothing else, we know they're gonna post a video making fun of our brand or like, you know,
in a way that you know about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Or like tangentially related to your brand. One of their videos that performed really well was they did a partnership with the DNC and they had some explicit lyrics, but it performed really well and it got 76,000 likes on one TikTok alone and people still talk about it. Like Ash was saying that people come up to them, they're like, oh my God, you have the DNC song.
Yeah, I definitely remember that one. I wasn't like actively following DNC content, but that one was like served to me because it was so popular and so unexpected, I feel like, in that format.
Which I think, the DNC would be like okay with that.
Yes, I think that's a key part of what they're doing that kind of like redefines brand safety is like, A, they're going to do it anyways, and B, what they're doing is so at that like if you as a brand get on board, then it's like, oh, you're in the know. You like are kind of allowing them to make fun of your brand and poke fun at perhaps everything you stand for, but it's not like at your expense when you are paying them to do it. And I think that reflects in how like so many people like engage with creators these days is like you'll open the comments and you'll see people being like, wow, I'm so glad you got this brand deal or whatever it is. And when it's something that is pushing the envelope and the brand is in on it, I think the brand then gets like a lot of recognition for like being with the culture.
It gives them some clout. I mean, Ash was saying that like one of her favorite comments was they did this like 13-part series with Spotify and like so many of the comments were like, I can't believe Spotify let you do this. And she was like, it was so fun to see that and Spotify loved it and they got a ton of engagement. So.
Yeah, I would love to be inside one of those conversations with like a Spotify and Grant and Ash and just like how far can they push it and what is the Spotify rep being like, actually, no, that's where we have to draw the line. But like, is it worth it to draw the line? I think that's the interesting question here is like, if you let the lines be pushed, like what does that reflect back on your brand at this current moment? Because brand safety is not, everyone swears, everyone like talks about things like authenticity is what the internet is about. So it's like, how do you tap into that as a brand if content like Grant and Ash is what's resonating.
And to that point too, I think like not even just swear words, but also just like certain taboo topics too. Like they were talking about how like some brands don't want to partner with them because they have the word twink in their like duo headline. And like they're like, that's not a slur. It's not a bad thing. You can say it. But another thing too is like they did this activation with EOS recently because EOS has this like shave oil. And it was based on a video that Grant had posted saying like, I'm seeing a lot of bush on mane. Like people are showing their pubes
I didn't know that was him.
on public facing content. So EOS did a bush on Main event where they had like a Main Street sign that said this and like used it to promote their shave oil. And like they partnered with the duo and they had this huge thing. And Grant said it was his favorite activation he's done to date. And they had all these people at the event and like got so much content out of it. And it provoked UGC and all this stuff. So I think it just shows that like you can push the envelope, but you don't have to be like explicit too. Like there's a way to like engage with this kind of stuff in a way that feels fun and new and fresh, but isn't like inappropriate.
Yeah, I think this is so interesting because I feel like we talk about brands themselves being like unhinged. And so I feel like that was really something that we saw in the last couple of years is on social media, a brand account like commenting in all lowercase, like being super casual, super current, and like extremely dressed down. And I feel like there's a little bit of a fatigue on that. Like some people will, a viral video happens and everyone's like, oh my God, the brands are in the comments. Like there's this, I think particularly among a younger, savvier consumer set. And I think this is a really interesting kind of way for brands to have it a little bit both ways is like, so there are some brands that maybe feel like we can do that on our main accounts, or there are some brands who say, we're going to do it through the creator as proxy. Like they can say things that we would never post maybe on our brand account, but we want to like still be fun and current and casual to get that attention from a younger, more, it's very ephemeral kind of stuff, and I just think that's kind of an interesting or irreverent really is the word I was looking for. But I just think that's such an interesting kind of shift, right? It's I'm sort of outsourcing the unhingedness to creators because they can do it. They can push the envelope and I'll be the brand that I benefit from it. I work with them, but there's a little bit of a distance. Yeah. And I wonder, how much more we're going to see that from brands who are saying, okay, maybe doing it from our own account is a little tired.
I mean, we talked about that a lot when we talked about the Staples baddie and Kaden, who is the creator, who is an employee at Staples and making content, but she posts it on her own account. And I think there is absolutely something to be said there about like, if you were to write down like brand safety rules for a brand, I wonder how different they would look for what goes on the brand's official accounts versus what goes on a creator that they partner with in their account. Because yes, obviously whatever they say about your brand will reflect on you, but there is a different type of like weight that is applied to something that you officially put on your account versus what a creator puts out there of their own free will. I think so much too when we talk about creator partnerships, brands talk about how they want it to feel real and they want it to connect with that creator's audience. And the brands who get it often are the brands that turn over that creative control to the creator partner that they're working with. Because if you're working with someone, there's a reason why, right? Like you must like something creatively that they're doing, something that they're doing to resonate with their audience. And that is not something that often a brand can like take by the reins when they're like, you have to make sure you hit this point and then you don't say this and you stick to our very specific rules. But there is inherent risk tied into that. And I'm curious how more and more brands may weigh those pros and cons as they work with creators, whether it's as someone as risky or unhinged as a Twink and a Redhead or just any creator partner at all.
Yeah, it's something I've thought about, especially I was writing recently about how creators are assuming executive titles at brands. And like if you bring a creator in and you give them an official title and you say, okay, you're part of our brand, you're not just a partner, you're not extraneous, you're part of us. How do you weigh, what they should be posting on their personal accounts versus your brand accounts? And like, do you establish what's right and what's wrong in terms of like what they're allowed to do? And I think it's something that isn't fully sorted out yet. It's like a very new phenomenon that's happening, but it's an interesting thing because they are an extension of your brand. But if you do just kind of like similar to what we talked about with like Staples baddie, let them do it on their own account, then I feel like there is a little bit of like arm's length there where you're like, okay, you can do what you want to do, and we can do what we want to do in our brand account.
Yeah. But I think as creator budgets, I feel like only get bigger, I get this feeling that brands are looking for more ways to incorporate creators into what their actual work is, right? So for example, bringing them in as like official positions in their companies, whether it's like, sometimes these positions are fake, I feel like.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes they're real, or sometimes they are visible enough that it is real in effect. I think an interesting example of that is Drewski is the chief switching officer at T-Mobile, which again sounds like a fake title.
I think it's in reference to switching provider.
Exactly. Like not a real C-suite title,
Yeah.
but it is out there. He's like featured in a lot of their ad campaigns. And he has made certain comments about Erica Kirk that perhaps is not representative of what T-Mobile stands for. We don't know. But like, how do you then reckon with that? It's like, you've already brought him into the fold. You put him in campaigns. You have this official title, and there's no way you could have planned for what this creator is going to say on a political issue, on a social issue. And I think as the brand safety rules kind of change here, it's like even more pertinent when you're kind of striking these long-term relationships with creators, which feels like an important strategy, but there are things to weigh.
I think the thing that's really interesting is like a creator is going to do what a creator will do to build audience and build attention and kind of service the fandom that they kind of have. And that might align with a brand to a certain extent, but it might not be perfectly hand in hand forever and ever.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's maybe this acknowledgement that brands have to be willing to accept is like, we might be in step for a little bit, and then we might part ways, and then we might come back. There's risk with, and there's always risk with working with a person who's real, you know, like some brands just invent a fake character to
AI influencers are a thing also.
I was gonna say, like, if you're Flo from Progressive, Flo will never do certain things, you know. But if you ever partner with a celebrity, you know, or an athlete, you see, or a musician, or what have you, there are always these moments where a brand might go, oh gosh, they're being a person in a way
we saw it
that's
a few
not.
years ago with like Adidas cutting Kanye West. Like, you know, like there have been some like big, well-known
Totally.
instances of like brands being like, okay, we can't be with you anymore.
But I think for a lot of creators, right, who are not maybe that's an extreme example, right? But we have creators who might go, I want to continue serving my audience, and they like this comedic content, and a brand might go, okay, well, that's, again, we have enough distance. That's totally fine. But I think there has to be that kind of acknowledgement, this understanding. But I think that brands also have to be willing to understand that a creator is not going to make a creator who's just constantly making like brand safe, super family friendly content all the time, 100% of the time, that might not serve their audience the best, right? I feel like kind of real honesty is what a lot of audiences are resonating with right now. People are saying, I'm giving you the unvarnished truth about X, Y, or Z, or I'm making jokes about something that are kind of make you stop and watch it again and go, oh my God, I can't believe they just said that on camera or what have you. And so brands have to kind of acknowledge that. I feel like Ash told you a little bit about like the PG element.
Yeah, kind of saying that she was even surprised herself that brands were willing to work with them when they started posting content. We have a clip of her talking about that here.
We started like getting followers, it was really cool to see brands like not shy away from working with us, because obviously we like wouldn't, like, we're not trying to cater like our normal videos to like be appealing to a brand. We're just hoping the brands that get it and they'll reach out to us. So that's been like really rewarding to see that, like, okay, like not everyone is trying to be like PG all the time, and we can reel it in if we need to, but I really like people who like who want to use us for our voice and like tap into that audience and don't try to, you know, suppress the humor of it all.
Yeah, so obviously brands are excited about this and they're working with them. They have so many brand partners, but I think it's also interesting that at the same time, like Duolingo recently came out and said that we're actually reeling back on our unhinged content. I think the CMO told Business Insider they're trying to go from 80% unhinged, 20% wholesome to more of a 50-50 split. And to
Love
him,
the numbers.
Yeah, he was like, we're doing quote unquote fewer butt jokes. So expect less of what you saw in the Super Bowl a couple years ago.
We're trying to become more unhinged on this.
Yes. We're actually going to incorporate more butt jokes into the podcast, so we're going the opposite
Just to
direction.
really upset the control room.
But it's interesting because I talked to Partyful, a couple, like the invite app for events. I talked to them like a month ago, and they had talked about how they're also straying away from Unhinged. It's a very Gen Z brand, and they were like, we want nothing to do with this. We are so much more interested in like responding to organic instances in culture that we had nothing to do with. Like, we want it to be organic. So I don't know. I feel like there's this interesting thing right now where like some brands are like, do not associate us with Unhinged, or we're pulling back. And then at the same time, we're seeing creators like seeing success with being unhinged.
The Partyful example is so interesting to me because I honestly don't get a lot of their marketing, but when I think about, I do use it. So I think about the way that the app itself works. Kelsey, you mentioned like you got a surprise. There's a feature on Partyful that's like you have a crush at the party or whatever it is. And I won't expose Kelsey's experience with this, but you had a weird experience with it. It's kind of a weird feature. So I think like the like actual elements of Partyful probably leans itself into like unhinged marketing. So interesting to hear them like kind of turn their cheek on it and be like, no, we're actually going to go the organic route.
I think it begs the question of like, what's a long-term strategy? Because to them, like they got mentioned in the pit, like somebody on the pit said, oh, I'll send you a Partyful. And they were like, great. And they used that and they posted it on their organic channels. And they were like, we're going to use this as a marketing opportunity for us. And then when all like the lookalike contests were happening, they're like, we're going to help people set up these events and we're going to like help them with the cover image and all this stuff and like really facilitate the creation of these events all across the country. So it's like, they were responding to stuff that was happening and then turning it into their own marketing moment. And I think to them, that has more longevity than just being like, we're so crazy. Because there is a question of like, how far can you push the bar? Like, how crazy can you get before it's like, okay, that's stale too. And we've talked about this before with like Wendy's Twitter, where like for a long time, that felt very novel. And it was like, look at all the brands fighting.
Yeah.
You know, Burger King versus Wendy's or whatever else. And now we're kind of like, okay, we're over
it's
that.
big silence brand energy when that happens now because it's been happening for so long. And that was a key part of why Duolingo is also dialing back the unhingedness is that I feel like they've realized that like you can take unhinged so far, especially on a brand owned account. How high can you raise the bar on unhingedness and still deliver that?
How many times can you kill your mascot?
Exactly.
Like, how violent can it be? Right. It like becomes, the limit does not exist, but it does exist for a brand.
Exactly.
But again, a creator does not have, they're just operating in a totally different reality. Like the brand that they have is like themselves as an entertainer.
Yeah.
You know, as somebody who's relatable or relevant with the people that are following them. And so they have a lot more freedom. But I liked what Ash said with like the brands that get it, and they call. And I think that if you are a brand, you have to kind of determine like, how much can I get it? How much am I willing to like to do that? Because if you do embrace something and somebody's like, oh my God, that's like so ick. There, you know, there is that kind of risk. And I think a creator actually is the great person to evaluate something and go, this isn't going to work for my audience. Like, because ultimately, like, yeah, a brand deal is great, but the much longer term investment is my audience will, if they hate this, they're not going to trust me, and I can't risk that. Like, it's too risky for them, and I feel like they're such a good arbiter of truth, you know, in that space.
And ultimately, you know that if a creator, like that's their brand, like Grant and Ash's brand is pushing the envelope and being a little crazy. Like that's their whole deal. So I feel like when they're posting branded content that's in that same vein, it feels authentic as opposed to like a Duolingo Unhinged post or a Wendy's Twitter post. Like ultimately, you know that that's a brand and that's a marketing strategy. So maybe it just feels inherently a little less authentic for that reason.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said too when you outsource that kind of brand safety risk to a creator and they are the ones doing it. If it goes poorly, if it turns into a controversy, I think of all of the creator influencer controversies I've ever engaged with, and like they might feel like drama in the moment, maybe for an hour, maybe for a week, and then it's kind of over. And like, I mean, you forget about it.
Think about the Tarte trips. Like how many
Exactly.
year over year people freak out about the Tarte branded trips and how extravagant they are. And they call out the creators that
And
have
they
gone
do
on
it
the
every
trip,
year.
and they keep going back.
Yeah.
And also, I can't even list off like a list of creators that went. You know,
Right.
like in the moment, it was like, oh, this person went. Now it's like, I don't know. I don't remember who went in 2022.
Yeah. See, I think that's an interesting example though, because like with that specifically, we remember the Tarte element of it, right? Because the Tarte trip has become a phenomenon in itself. But when, let's say, someone who partners with Grant and Ash, like they push the envelope too far, I think that will reflect back more on Grant and Ash and perhaps that brand for a flash in the pan. But I think it's easier for the brand to get over whatever controversy that is when it's ultimately more reflective on the creator itself. The Tarte one, I hear what you're saying, but it's also like, oh, but they as a brand continue to keep doing it.
They keep going. Yeah,
So-
that's a conundrum that we can talk about on another
Yeah.
episode.
But I wonder too about that too, because it's like it's branded as a Tarte trip. It's not it's not like, oh, Tarte just sent worked
Yeah,
with
it's not like beauty
25
influencer
creators
trip.
to
Yeah.
do something on their own accounts. You know what I mean? It's like kind of a different sort of arrangement.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't know. I do wonder, and I think about for Grant and Ash, like part of the whole joke is that they pick brands that are wholesome and family friendly and then do something
They have partnered with Grindr.
completely
They
right.
have
They have.
Yeah, but like
I feel like a lot
Panera,
of the,
like-
I feel like a lot of the unbranded jokes are like we're something wholesome and normal, and you'd see it at a strip mall, and like we're gonna say something completely out of pocket about that space or that brand, or and I think that is the joke.
Yeah.
And so if you're a brand, like I think you really have to evaluate, like, is that a joke I'm willing to be a part of? Am I okay with being a punchline or like playing in on that tension for sort of the shock value or the entertainment comedic value of it? And if you are, I think the question is, how often am I willing to do that?
Yeah.
Is it a one-off thing, or is it I'm doing this every week? Because again, you don't want to do the same playbook over and over and over, because that gets to a point where somebody says silence brand, like that's how we get there.
You also have to like be willing to go all in on something like this too, because that was something that Ash talked about, where she was like, some brands will reach out to us and like completely censor us. I think we have a clip of her going into more detail.
As brands, like we'll get on like calls or something, and they'll be like, we want you guys to be you, like no rules, like whatever, and then it's like you have a 25 slide pitch deck of all the do's and don'ts. So I'm just like, well, that's like, just be honest about it, because like there are things you don't want us to do. And I think like the more rules you have, like the more complicated it's gonna be, and I don't think the end result will be as good.
We talk about this all the time with like when you have too many rules, it slows the process down. Like even just if you're kind of like, I need 45 people to sign off and approve on this, like by the time you've posted about a meme, it's like it's stale.
dead. Yeah.
It's like dead already, just because of the speed of culture. So we talk about agility a lot, but I feel like this is an element of agility, is like, can you again identify this creator might work and like do what you're going to do and give it to us and we're going to tap into it, versus saying we want to try to have it both ways. We like them, we want to work with them, but we want them to make something that they would never naturally make.
I think that's part of identifying yourself, whether you are a brand that makes sense to work with a creator like Grant and Ash or anyone who is going to push the envelope. How willing are you to let them do that? And if you find yourself writing down a list of do's and don'ts, I think that's a pretty clear signal that like this is not a space for you. And I think there's a lot more value in identifying that for yourself, that like this is not a space for your brand, than it is to try and be like, oh, they're trending, they have a lot of followers, they are clearly resonating with their audience, we want to tap into that audience. But like if there's just no way for you to like loosen up on those reins or like really trust that creator, I think it's ultimately not worth it to pursue that, because it will come across. I think that's what Ash is saying, is that like, it's not fun for them, I'm sure, to like navigate all those rules. And I think that comes across in the content if it ends up getting made anyways, that like people see through that. And it's like, everyone wants authenticity, and it's like, authenticity can't really come with that list of do's and don'ts at the end of the day.
Right. You've just spent a bunch of money on a creator sort of partnership where the content is not very highly engaged. The creators might not like it very much or feel super good about it. And you don't feel good about it because it doesn't really do what anybody went out to do.
Yeah, and the audience isn't going to respond to it because Ash was saying that like one of the things they do is she's like, we put the brand right up front when we do a branded post. Like we put it right in the front so you know what it is, but we keep it entertaining. Like we do recurring bits and we do certain things that fit with our organic content so that people are like, okay, I know it's an ad, but it's still funny. I still want to keep watching it.
Which speaks to, we talk about this all the time, the continuing like entertainment driven advertising. This is just another form of that. It's specifically internet comedy and it's what you expect from this creator. But as more and more people expect their advertising to also be entertainment, you can't come into a creator space and be like, well, this is the actual form of entertainment and comedy that I want you to provide because it follows my brand safety guidelines. It's not what works here, and I think you have to accept that as a brand.
Yeah. I also think you kind of have to understand which audience you're going to get on through these different things. So like, will my parents ever see a Panera I know that Grant and Ash have not partnered with Panera, but will they ever see sort of a sponsored post from them on TikTok? No, because neither of them are on TikTok. Neither of them are on Instagram. Honestly, they're living the life and the dream. But like that, they would never come across that. So it wouldn't even occur to them to like whatever joke or whatever is for that demographic on that platform. And so it's just going to be for a totally different audience. And again, that's like, we talk about that in advertising all the time. Of course, you have different channels for different people, but it's like the risk, I think, also applies to the type of audience you're going to maybe get on that. But there's always the risk that it breaks containment and it comes from TikTok and this like in joke for 25-year-olds out, and now suddenly it's like on the news.
Someone might screen record it and put it on Facebook Reels, and that's an entirely different audience than TikTok. Who knows what's happening over there?
And same point as we made earlier, like if you put it on the brand account, like your parents might follow the Panera brand account, but they probably don't follow Grant Nash. Like you're reaching a different audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where do you guys think unhinged marketing goes from here? Like what happens at this point?
I do feel like this outsourcing trend is going to continue. I feel like brands are going to sort of reel it back a little bit because, again, there's a saturation point. You can't just be increasingly unhinged forever, And I think, trends are cyclical. I think we're going to see a point where brands kind of get quieter, but like maybe start relying on creators a little bit more.
I think that's going to happen, the sort of outsourcing, as we see brands go back to an earnestness. And I think that's because we've talked about this before, like in-person events, experiential, people do, audiences of all stripes are kind of craving genuine connection. And I think that requires an earnest brand in some form. And I think that doing too much comedy, too much unhinged stuff feels cynical. It's almost cynical in a way. And I feel like we're going to move away from that. And so again, when a creator does it, it can feel very genuine and with them. When a brand does it, it might feel a little bit less, an audience the audiences might just not resonate with it as much. So I think those things might happen almost in tandem.
Yeah. I'm curious. I have my eye on like what creators will do, like as they maybe potentially get more of that risk and unhingedness like outsourced to them. Does someone like Grant and Ash eventually like grow out of this type of comedy and they want to mature and they want to be more earnest? Then where does it go? Like then like does that comedy move on? Does it just move to the next creator? I'm curious if like do we ever reach like full saturation point on unhingedness and it just kind of goes away for a little bit? Perhaps not. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
Who knows? Well, thanks so much for joining us today. And if you have thoughts on unhinged brand strategy, Grant Nash's favorite brand deals or videos, send us an email at mkbw@morningbrew.com, which you can also find in the show notes. And we'll catch you next week.